Eshani, aka Total Makeup Junkie 101, and welcome to another holiday hoopla review video. Today I'm going to be talking all about the new Urban Decay Full Spectrum palette. If you guys have been following holiday hoopla on my channel, you guys probably saw that I did do another Urban Decay palette video that was on their Ultimate Naked Basics palette. And while that palette wasn't specifically released for a holiday launch, it did come out right around the holiday time, but I do feel like this is the palette that Urban Decay probably meant to be their limited edition holiday palette. In today's review video, as always, I will be going through the entire palette, showing you guys full palette swatches. I will do a couple of side-by-side comparisons next to some other palettes that you guys really wanted to see, like the original Electric palette, as well as the Kat Von D Mi Vida Loca remix palette. This is what the outer box of the palette looks like. It is really, really cute, but this is what the palette itself looks like. I do really love the outer palette packaging. It is in a very, very heavy, sturdy plastic packaging. It does have this kind of very interesting, like, striped pattern, I guess, going across, and then it does have the UD and the colorful jeweled. I will say that this UD is raised off of the packaging, so if this is something that you kind of wanted to stack with other palettes, it does create a little bit of bulkiness. I do think it's beautiful nonetheless, but it's just something to keep in mind. Now this palette opens kind of differently. It took me a while to get the hang of it, but basically there's like this little like tab down here that actually doesn't do anything. You just need to kind of like hold onto the tab and then pry the palette open, because it really is held with a magnet. Honestly, I was kind of hoping for like a little button push or a little like latch or something, but this is just like a little bit more effort. Not a big deal once again, but something I wanted to note. So when you open the palette up, as always, you are getting a very large mirror up at the top, and then these are the actual eyeshadows you're getting. You are getting 21 different colors. At the bottom, you are also getting a little double-ended brush, and I generally do like the brushes that Urban Decay includes in their palettes. This one does come with a little kind of shorter, flat, stiff brush, as well as a blender brush. Also, in case I forgot to mention, this palette does retail for $55, and it is a limited edition palette. Now, as for the colors you're getting, if you are a colorful eyeshadow wearer or lover, you will definitely be attracted to this palette. I do like the overall look of this palette. When I just look at it, I can see just, you know, spectrums, rainbows of colors. It does look really beautiful. Before I get into talking about the actual pigmentation and texture of these shadows, I did want to go in and show you guys swatches of this entire palette, just so you guys can see how these products actually swatch out on my skin tone. So here is the top row of the palette. From left to right, we have Alchemy, Warning, Midnight Blaze, 100, Minx, Delirious, and Platonic. Here we have the second row in the palette. From left to right, we have Gossip, Sais, Calavera, Hatter, Blindsided, Sketch, and Iced. And then here we have the final row in the palette. From left to right, we have Paranoia, Jones, Goldmine, Mean, Metamorphosis, Faded, and Bump. So first off, let me just start off by saying that Urban Decay really went a little out of the box when they named these colors. A lot of these colors are very extreme. Let's talk about the pigmentation and the texture of these shadows. I am not impressed by the overall pigmentation or the quality of this palette. As you guys could probably tell by the swatches, many of the colors lack pigmentation. I had to build up some of those colors so much just to get any sort of pop on my skin. The texture of these shadows is not buttery or smooth the way I'm used to Urban Decay shadows feeling. I feel like the majority of these are just so thin and powdery. It just kind of reminds me of like a very cheap, underperforming eyeshadow. I'm actually really shocked because Urban Decay is known for their bright colors. They're known for thinking kind of outside of the box in terms of what traditional makeup consists of. I was expecting them to just kind of knock it out of the park. And unfortunately, this is probably one of the most underperforming Urban Decay eyeshadow palettes I've used in years. I don't know if this was like a rushed release. I don't know if they just didn't test this palette, or maybe they didn't care because it was a limited edition palette and they just didn't think people would really remember it or put that much value in it. But honestly, this was such a disappointment. If someone blindfolded me and just had me stick my finger in these pans and just swatch these colors out, I would never have guessed that this was an Urban Decay formula. If you put these over a sticky primer or like a white shadow base to really get these bright colors to pop, you can absolutely make it work. Perhaps if you've never used any other Urban Decay shadows, like the Naked palettes or their Vice palettes or the Electric palette or any of the other palettes they've released, you might go into this with a lot lower expectations than I did, because I know what Urban Decay can do and I know what mark and what standard I hold them to. So this is not cutting it. And it really hurts me to say that, because you guys know how much I love Urban Decay. And I do think this concept of like a rainbow eyeshadow palette isn't really something that you see, at least in Sephora. Of course, if you were going to go to something like Coastal Scents or BH Cosmetics, I know many of us started off on the 88 shadow palettes, which is literally a rainbow of colors. And this is a little bit of a step up from that, but honestly, not by very much. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do some quick side-by-sides with some of the other palettes I mentioned earlier. We'll go ahead and do a side-by-side of the Urban Decay Electric palette. Now, obviously, while the size of this palette is significantly smaller than the Full Spectrum palette, this is the bright shadow palette from Urban Decay that I thought was very, very good. I think the quality in this palette is absolutely excellent, and this is a palette that is currently being discontinued, so it is on sale if you guys are interested in purchasing it. So here we have those two palettes side by side. I'm doing my best to kind of avoid the glare of my ring light, but it's kind of difficult right now. Obviously, you can see on the left we have the Full Spectrum, on the right you have the Electric palette. And while I don't think any of the colors in particular are exact dupes of one another, I do think the Electric palette has a lot more just very, very vivid and bright shades. There are a lot less colors to pick from in the Electric palette, but honestly, I think the quality of this one is leaps and bounds above the Full Spectrum. And then the comparison that so many of you guys wanted to see, the Full Spectrum next to last year's Kat Von D Mi Vida Loca Remix Holiday palette. And there you have a look at those two next to each other. Of course, on the left you have the Full Spectrum, and on the right you have the Kat Von D palette. And once again, I wouldn't necessarily say any of the colors are exact dupes of one another, but they are both very bright, rainbowy type palettes. I definitely think the overall quality of this Kat Von D palette, once again, leaps and bounds above the Full Spectrum palette. This is probably one of my favorite colorful rainbowy type palettes that I've ever used. So I do think if you already own this, the Full Spectrum is honestly going to be a step down. Now, I know that the two palettes that I could do comparisons of for you were both limited edition, and or the Electric palette is currently being discontinued. So I don't know how readily available that one's going to be for much longer. Unfortunately, I can't think of a permanent eyeshadow palette that is similar to this that can give you better quality. If you guys know of one, can you please let me know in the comments down below, because I would love to check it out, try to find something that's permanent, still a rainbow eyeshadow palette, but gives you a lot better quality, because unfortunately, this was just a disappointment. And now to quickly give you guys a price breakdown, I'll go ahead and do a breakdown of all of the three palettes that I showed you guys. So as for the Urban Decay Spectrum palette, like I said, this is $55 for 21 shades. Each of the pans holds 1.2 grams of product. So that means you are getting 25.2 grams of product total. That breaks down to $2.18 per gram that you are paying for this palette. As far as the Urban Decay Electric palette, the original retail price of this palette was $49. Now, I know it's on sale right now, but I'm just gonna go ahead and break it down according to the full size. So this does have 10 shades in it. Each of the shades also holds 1.2 grams. That means you are getting 12 grams of product total. That means that you are paying $4.08 per gram in this palette, which is almost double what you're paying in the full spectrum. And then finally, for the Kat Von D Mi Vida Loca Remix palette, this palette was $59. It has 24 shades inside. Each of the shades has 1.1 grams of product, meaning that you're getting 26.4 grams of product total. That breaks down to $2.23 per gram that you are paying in this palette. So $2.23 versus $2.18. Honestly, the quality of this one was unbeatable. Unfortunately, it's not available anymore. I really wish I could have done a comparison of another palette that is readily available. So anyways, that pretty much wraps up my review of the new Urban Decay Full Spectrum palette. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting and subscribing. It honestly means the absolute world to me. In case you guys haven't checked out my holiday hoopla playlist, I will link it below. I have so many other holiday palette and gift set review videos for you guys. Thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you guys in my next video on Monday. I will see you then. Bye. Just say this here and now. This is probably the best, most exciting haul. This is literally your ultimate naked basics matte palette, anything that you can pull in.